Hey, welcome everybody. But we're closing out the inaugural 2022 Family Business Festival. And we've got none other than Mr. Family Business himself, John Broones. Now, funnily enough, full circle, John, we thought about this concept early on, Matthew and I. We sort of bootstrapped and self-funded this, and we wanted to sort of sound it out and get a bit of a point in the right direction. So John was really generous with his time early on, and he sort of supported us with some questions and emails and some bits and pieces. So it's great to have John on full circle to help us close it out. And little preemptive bio on John, for those that don't know. John's also known as Mr. Family Business, which is a terrific title. It's well earned. So John's had over 50 years plus experience working in family business and helping family businesses. There's a really terrific arc there. We've only got 30 minutes, so I think I've timed it, John. We've sort of got 30 seconds for each year you've been active, so you're gonna have to get through that 50 years really quickly. But no, John's going to talk through some key points and some key moments and some of his experiences. And also along the way, John's accumulated some terrific accolades. Most recently, the Family Business United Hall of Fame. So I might just get a little intro from John about that Hall of Fame and what that means. And then I think we can sort of get started. So John, just tell us about that latest award that you've picked up.
Thanks, Jamie. Good to be here. That particular award was given to me from Family Business United. They're an organisation that supports and enhances families in business around the UK and Europe. Paul Andrews is the head of that business, and he has a global network, a global footprint. I was very, very nicely invited into that Hall of Fame with some very special people that are professors and academics, quite privileged. And I think the reason I was in there is because I seem to connect with a lot of people globally. I'm in a study group that's an international study group. So, yeah, it's makes me feel quite proud, to say the least.
No, terrific, mate. And look, thanks for having some time to come for a bit of a chat. And also, I think we've bumped into you. We've worked on some Hall of Fame awards, videos and things for you along the way. So that's a nice little segue. I'm just going to make you host. There's a couple of slides we can potentially cut to when you're ready, John. But it'd be terrific to get a sense of where did it all start? And there's a lot there to unpack, but I'd love to get a sense of what were some of those first experiences? Was it watching the family work? Was it spending time in the factory, or did you just have an innate curiosity to be part of that family business? I'd be terrific to get a sense of where it started and started for you.
Okay, so do you want me to share the screen now and kick it off?
Yeah, let's do that. Some imagery would be great.
So I can share screen?
Yep, go for it. I've handed you the reins.
That should be a nice picture of 1942.
Yep, we've got that.
And in the front row in the middle is my granddad. On the left-hand side is my dad, and the right-hand side is my Uncle Jack. So that was a photograph taken in 1942 before the business became a public company. And back in those days, the company name was Broones and Sons. My grandfather started it with my dad and my uncle, and as they grew it, obviously my granddad had some pretty big plans and moved it to grew it to a point where it needed to be a little bit more than just a family business. So he grew it into a company called Broones Containers. Now, Broones Containers had bought a series of companies that were owned by the family, but they also listed on the stock exchange. And this is two properties. We were a Ford dealership. We were cardboard corrugated containers, something like Amcor and Visy today. And I remember going in there as a 4 or 5 year old kid into the office and pinching pens and pads out of the stationery cupboard, as most kids would do in the family business, something to scribble on and draw on. So it wasn't until the 50s that the company became public. And there's a balance sheet from 1959 it says the assets were 530,000 pounds. If you talk about today's language and converting it $2 to the pound, you can go up in that measure, and then it gets messy. But there's a profit and loss balance sheet, and here's the profit and loss, where in the year of 1959 they made 36,000 pounds. In today's language, it doesn't sound very much. But when it became the public company, my dad and my uncle were both directors, and they controlled over 50% of the business, the family did. And there were cousins and nephews and nieces that had been taken on as employees somewhere in the business. And it was a growing public company. It was really a go-ahead business. But unfortunately, it got to a point where my granddad passed, and my dad ended up going in. When my granddad passed, my uncle and father became the majority shareholders. They kept the business going for a few years, but they got an offer too good to refuse. So they sold the business. Dad kept parts of the business.
Yep.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, so like, were you, I'm just curious, it's a nice little segue, like when did you sort of get the bug as well? Was it pre-sale? Were you in there helping out, or are you still a little bit too young at that stage? It might have been 9 or 10.
A bit too young so the public company was sold, and I was in my early teens, and I'd be working in the business that my dad had kept, which was a sawmilling business, a timber merchandising business. We bought woods from overseas and had a timber yard. So there's a couple of photos there of that too. And that's when I started to think, there's a good reason to have a family in business. Because if I wanted to take a holiday, somebody else in the family who's trustworthy would be looking after the show for us. So it enabled that little bit of freedom to do things that maybe you can't do in a public company.
So yeah, having some trusted peers around, solid set of hands, shared values, allowed you to sort of, some extra time to take some time off. When do you remember, was there a point where you remember sort of officially getting a bit of a bug for it? Like I remember you mentioned, we had a bit of a chat prior, and you used to work in the shop. I think you mentioned you used to work in the mill, and you had a couple sort of early injuries. Was there, any sort of stories that stick out, or anything that might have triggered that bit of a bug for you that you thought you might go all in? Or was it a gradual thing?
It was when you go in regularly as a child of a business owner, you actually emotionally end up buying into the business. I liked the people, they treated me nicely, so why wouldn't, I'm the boss's son. I didn't have that perspective necessarily at the time, but I was being treated well. Nothing was too hard. If I wanted something, people would help me around the place. And I liked the feel of being able to walk in and talk to people. So there was already a vibrancy about the idea of being a family member in a business. And that worked really well for me. But we had the timber business. We had an old sawmill. This isn't exactly the old sawmill, but it's a photo of something similar to what we used to work with, belt-driven saws, roll cases that were all mechanically driven. We got into hydraulics and a lot more power and direct power, not belts and generators operations. So we moved a bit further forward. But and when this was going on, I never reported to my dad, who owned the business, who was the sole shareholder. I used to report to the managers. So I had responsibility. After I'd left school, 17 years old, I went to work in the mills and in the timber yards. So I never actually reported to Dad. I had to perform. I would occasionally get told off, or I'd occasionally do something the wrong way. But I had to answer to them, and they had to keep me learning at the same time. Other things, timber yard, used to make up by hand timber orders. So I was learning from the ground up, which is what a lot of people today consider a good thing. Sometimes you want to be inside the same family business that you start in. Sometimes families will decide that it's better that the children will go and work in other places other than the family business. so I've spent time in there. I've spoken to the people, and I've been out on site working with other family business members who were clients of ours, learning along the way and sharing experiences. Other things.
Any takeaways come to mind? Is there anything you sort of remember that you picked up that you thought might have been a little bit of an advantage, whether it's some sort of values or learning or connectedness? I'm just curious, if anything comes to mind there for you.
Interesting you asked about values. Almost everybody back in those days, we seemed to wear our hearts on our sleeves. If we said something and we shook hands on it, that was how the deal would go through. Today, you will find people that will do that. They have very strong integrity, but things have changed in industry where we like to have processes documented. We like to have people signing on the dotted line. Computers have tightened things up where the processes can be a lot easier. So things have changed, but the basics of being in a family business are still the same. You need to have a core set of values. You want to understand why you're doing what you're doing, so your purpose is kind of understood. And just going to work and getting a salary isn't really the purpose. It needs to be a bit bigger than that, community-based. What are we doing for our employees? What are we doing for our clients? How do we make their lives better too? So there's a much bigger view of that.
Yeah, nice. Just personal curiosity. Just love to touch on community. That's a really interesting one. There's a little bit of a thread behind why we're doing the Family Business Festival. We just wanted to shine the light on some awesome local family businesses, share their stories, but also, funnily enough, with COVID at the moment, everything's sort of gone online. People have been stuck in the house. So I'm just curious about that sense of community. We're trying to foster that, get out, speak to local businesses and have local businesses sort of interact with the community. Any community memories or thoughts come to mind? Was it at that stage, was it a local based business with a local sort of footprint, or were you shipping interstate or nationally or internationally? Just want to get a sense of community.
Yeah. When my grandfather passed in 1966, in his will, he left £100,000 that was to be put aside for charity. And that was put into a bank account and interest was distributed. There were 2 family members on the board, 2 non-family members on the board. And I was brought up understanding that you give back to the community that is supporting you. So we were giving back to businesses and charities that were local to the business, the areas that we worked in, and things. I remember my grandfather one time on a Christmas holiday. It wasn't just the employees that got the benefit of the Christmas break. They organised a football oval somewhere. Santa turned up in a helicopter and all the husbands and wives for a barbecue were there with their kids. Santa was handing out toys left, right and centre. So it was a family day for the whole family, but the whole Broons Consolidated business was sharing a family day. And that doesn't really happen very often these days.
And that's true. But yeah, there's an interesting link there too as well. We're sort of seeing lots of labour shortages and things. So I think that connection again, I think local family businesses are terrific pathways for apprenticeships and staff and local jobs and things. So it's just terrific to hear that first-hand experience about community and supporting the community. And look, the community is vital to a business too. You're going to need good people to come in and help run the place. So yeah, just a little curiosity there, and you lost that a little bit. I'm pro commerce, but it's just interesting with everything clicking online. I'd hate us to sort of miss that. So no, terrific.
It's an interesting step because I was 17 when I left school and went to work, and I was working in the business. I was moved around inside the business. I had jobs to do. I was really set up. Once or twice I got set up to fail by a manager, but those stories I can tell offline sometime if anybody wants to know. But it got to a point where I'd been married for a year or two, and my dad said, okay, go overseas, have a holiday, we'll take you overseas. And when you come back, you'll become my right-hand man and you'll see how I do things and how I run things. So Mum and Dad took my wife and I off to Europe, and we had a great holiday, and things were really fantastic. Unfortunately, we came home from that holiday. My dad had lung cancer, and about 3 months later, he'd passed away. So lots of change happened after that, because here's the thing in family business, no one really knew what was in Dad's will.
Yeah.
Well, Mum would have, because she got everything.
Yeah.
Now, I have 3 older sisters. The oldest sister was Dad's right-hand person. And Mum, owning everything, turned to the oldest sister, who's 13 years older than me, and said, "You're the managing director." At the same time, I then recognised the fact that I'm the prodigal son, it should be me. Well, that was my definition at 27 years of age. I didn't know that it wasn't going to be just given to the son because you're the only boy. There's a lot of other things that need to be taken into account. Needless to say, I was also very naive in the business sense, because I'd only been working in our business.
Yep.
So my older sister became managing director. I worked for her as director of logistics and operations. I had a brother-in-law who was looking at sales, and my sister looked after the administration. And everything worked kind of nicely, and we all still came together for a family get-together once a week. We had dinner together on a regular basis. And it was all nice and fine. And then in the late 80s, we had a recession, and
I
it hit us.
I just want to frame that. I just want to frame that quickly. So it sounds like you were working on a bit of a planned pathway to enter in the business and have a lot of time for handover and things, and hence your holiday break. But it sounds like you sort of, everyone jumped in boots and all quite quickly once your dad was sort of diagnosed and had a turn. Is that, was that a bit of a shock to have that sort of turnaround quite quickly?
It was a shock. It changed everything. Yeah. My dad had built a sawmill in Canberra, and I was flying up Monday to Friday to run that, and at the same time be involved with the resource issues down at the other sawmills. I had a little bit to do with importing timbers from overseas, but my brother-in-law was looking after that. It was challenging, and we were all sort of trying to find our feet in our new positions. Yeah. So it took a bit of time to really work out who was doing what. And I was kind of frustrated at the same time that we weren't growing as a business. But then again, I didn't know what it was that we needed to change to make it work a bit better or more effectively, or be visionary to some degree, because obviously my granddad and my dad were kind of visionary to be able to grow businesses and go into new industries. Yeah. So it changed, and this recession, when it hit us, there were 5 families living off the one business, and when things get tough and cash flow dries up, people start wanting money. So we had a few arguments over the dinner table, and after a year or two, it was very difficult. My brother-in-law that had been in the business till then, he'd left the business, so it was my sister and myself, and it got to a point where I was so frustrated, I went to my mother and said, "Listen, I didn't say that I was ready to leave, but in my head I was ready to walk away." I said, "Would you be prepared if I put a proposal together to you and the family about doing something different? I'll buy the business from the family." And she said yes.
So at that stage, you knew you were in boots and all. The thought of becoming a salary man, for lack of a better word, was on the radar. You just knew this was sort of in you.
I was a salaried man. I had bought into the business.
Yeah.
Salaries are part of it, but also families have the advantage of being able to, at discretion, pass funds on to different individuals with the family. If you're making profits, money becomes a bit more of a tool, and it can be used as a blunt instrument, or it can be used as a bribing instrument. Money becomes a bit of a game for those in control. So you've got to understand that sometimes when money is tight, you don't have those freedoms, and in fact, it becomes more constricting.
But you knew you were all in. You were, this is it.
I was all in or all out.
Okay.
And my mother said, "Yes, I'll listen to your idea." So what happened then was, using some advisors, picked up. I went through a whole process that was my own process. And I've worked on this and refined it over years about how to make a thriving business, thriving family business. And really what I was doing was politically correct in the terms of approach of age and gender and how I went about the whole exercise to put together in 6 months a proposal. And we sat in an accountant's boardroom, just the family members. And we had a board meeting that lasted almost 3 hours, where I spoke to my documented proposal that had been distributed to the family beforehand, and there was opportunities for questions. And we had the big conversation, and I walked out of that meeting. And it was kind of a funny feeling, because this, to me, that meeting was a crystal point for me in my life, because I knew that I could manage conversations with a diverse group of people with different desires, different desired outcomes, and different challenges, and still come up with agreement inside a family. And that's something that tells me that I can help families in business thrive. It's a matter of not having the conversation one-off. It's a matter of process, and that's the sort of stuff that I've built over the years. And I'm not an accountant and I'm not a lawyer, but this stuff, when I work for the family, we can work through all of the things that need to be done. So I got out. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was just saying, my gut feel too, I think there can be some, I tried to work with my dad, and my dad's got a business. We just butted heads. So we're just kind of amicably doing our own things, and we tried to get that work. And I just wanted to sort of frame that I think there can be some hypersensitivity, as you mentioned, trying to bring the family along. There's going to be a big change. It might have some financial impacts. It might impact people's identities. I'm sure there's a vast array of diplomacy tools there from, everyone's going to have a slightly different communication style as well. So to be able to go in there and prepare for that and have a successful meeting, I don't want to downplay that. I think that's always a really kind of a tough thing. And it sounds like, that really a real tool set there to sort of pull that off. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and we've only got 30 minutes, so you could probably just drill down in that itself. It's quite dummy.
I bought the business because it was mine. I got to a place where I could change the business, because I worked out I really didn't like the business.
Yeah.
So I did a whole lot of stuff. I value added. I put into if you find gum vein in timber and pinholes in timber, I'm the first guy to do it.
Now, what is that? Is that sort of
that's what you call the natural feature.
Okay, the natural look of timber versus heavily manufactured.
Yeah. Up until that time, until the early 90s, everybody that bought furniture wanted everything smooth and clean. So this guy, Rex Carr, he took our product on and he said, I'll make some furniture, and it went off. It just took off.
Yeah,
it went fantastic. And because it went that well, I'd buried a lot of money into this project, and all of a sudden I could get some money out of it, and help me get into a position where I could sell the business. Yeah. So it was kind of unique, and I sold the business in 97.
So you're navigating that transition and that buyout. So it sounds like that's freed you up to be sort of unencumbered, and you allowed you to go and innovate and change direction quite quickly. A little bit of agility returned. And
in that time, I had a lot of friends that were also working in family businesses who kept on coming to me and saying, how did you get out of your family business? How did you do that? And stay friends with your siblings? How did you do that? And that's what put me on the path that got me onto FBA and working in those things. So I did a whole lot of other things. I sold olive trees into China. I had a property maintenance business. I did lots of things for 4 or 5 years after I sold the business. But I was very much interested in tech. Tech as a peer mentoring thing, but mostly Family Business Australia. I've done their accreditation courses, so I'm a specialist family business advisor with them. Family Business Australia, I've been on the board when I did have the business. I've been on the committee over here in Western Australia for a number of years. We've just changed the structure in FBA, so the committee doesn't exist. I've been an ambassador for FBA. And all this time in the mid-90s, I got involved with something called the Family Firm Institute, and that's an educator body that educates advisors globally about how to deal with families in business. And since then, I've presented at a global conference of theirs. I've been made a fellow of the Family Firm Institute. I've spoken at their conference. That was taken in London some years ago. So I presented over there. These days, I'm coaching and mentoring a lot. So here's some business owners that I've been coaching. And here's a forum group that I run here in Western Australia. Family business members get into family business forum groups. We went away on a retreat for a few days. This photo was taken at Lewin Estate, the winery, where Dennis Horgan's in there, and we had a birthday of one of the members there on the day, so we celebrated that. And like I said, you mentioned earlier some of the accolades. Well, I've got these photos. The one on the left is me getting the Family Business Advisor of the Year in 2019. And the one on the right was, I was surprised to see this because I wasn't truly aware of it. But being announced, I think I'm the only guy wearing a casual T-shirt. But yeah, that was the Hall of Fame only a few months ago. So I love doing this, and I know that I've built something up that I can actually help. It's my own methodology that helps families in business thrive. And I think that's probably on the 3:30. So there you go. And if there's questions or whatever, people can always ring me or send me emails.
Well, we might go over a little bit. I've got to work out how to use Zoom, of course. So I'm just going to take back reclaim host. So you might see my ugly mug. While I've got you, there's a couple little, I'm happy to go over just a little bit. Well, I said we'll share the recording as well, but so the Family Business Festival is all about shining a light on local family business founders and passions and values and our local family business heroes. I've got a couple of questions. Is there a certain stuff, is there a certain stuff or a thing that a family business might have different to, say, a multinational, do you think? Or over time they sort of correlate and become a bit more similar? I'm just curious about, is there a stuff or a thing that drives, or you think that maybe a range of small businesses might fuel them from small to large?
So size doesn't matter. I know it sounds a terrible quote, but size doesn't matter. You'll find that some family businesses are huge, like Peugeot, for example. As a family business, why do they get termed a family business? Well, they only own 35% of the shareholding, but they have strategic control of the business at board level. So that puts them in a particular position. Lindsay Fox is a family business. It's a huge corporation.
Yeah.
So the size is not necessarily relevant. It's who controls the business. Large corporations are for the shareholders, where you'll find a board that makes the decisions, hires and fires a CEO who runs the business for the board and the benefit of the shareholders. Families in business should be the same thing. The thing is, most of the people are wearing 3 different hats or 4 different hats, because we have governance that gets in the way of the ownership stuff. And ownership can be the shares in the business, but it can also be the holiday house or the boat or the investments that the family makes. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you get involved with family business.
But is there a thing, do you think there's a passion or a drive or something out of just sort of, I'm just curious. I don't want to dwell on a point that might be a bit dead, but versus just,
family businesses,
legal frameworks and accountancy frameworks are universal. I'm just curious, is there a thing or a stuff?
Okay. Family businesses will continue to be family businesses if the older generation wants it that way first, and then if the next generation wants to buy in to taking on the stewardship role of taking on that family business. And I use the word stewardship because they will probably have in their mind the probability that they would like to keep it for their children too. But in time, as time goes by, they're going to have to ask themselves the questions: do we want to give this to the next generation? And then the next generation again will have to come to the table and say, yes, we want it, or no, we don't. And that's how you get these enduring families in business that have been around for hundreds of years. They actually understand the fact, or sometimes family will make it, you have to be aware of the fact that you're going to be a shareholder. You have to have this mindset. You have to be able to thinking about that stewardship role into the future for your kids.
Yeah. Part of me, I like to believe too, I like to believe that part of handing that torch and carrying that torch. I think a bit of a legacy, handing over some family values and things that keep driving that. Because, let's say it's a 20 or 30-year-old family business, 40-year-old family business. The older generation might have sort of spun that up, but I like the idea that there's some shared values that go across generations that help drive it outside of just a shareholder or a dividend or a thing. So yeah, that's my little.
The the values that a family holds true to and the way they live those values are the way that most families then bring those values, sometimes unintentionally, but generally they bring those values into the way the business operates. So the culture is set by the leaders in the family business. And if those values are discussed sufficiently and are clear enough, your values will be able to help choose your suppliers, your customers. We talk very much today about the environmental aspects of being in business. ESG is a very big thing. So somebody's got to be able to champion these ideas and going between families. If your values are strongly ESG, then you're going to travel, you'll make the business travel a path along the environmental stuff. If you're not strong on it and you really don't care about burning diesel, then you'll probably be going into mining or something like that really needs those machines. I don't know. But there's the values that you talk about are critical. You have to be able to articulate them and know them really well.
And it sounds like, it's a great vehicle to continue to foster those intergenerationally versus, as I said, just a divvy check or, just a financial gain, because people can go and join Google or Facebook, but it sounds like there's some real longevity with that drive and passion and community impact. Terrific, mate. We're sort of getting the end now. And look, I want to sort of tie it up. It sounds like 50 years, we probably gleaned over a bunch of bits and bobs, some very important bits and pieces, but it sounds like all that experience and acumen and those stories has sort of got to, as you mentioned, to where you are now, to be an advocate, an ongoing supporter of family businesses and helping family businesses thrive. Because you're still super active in the advisory space now too, aren't you?
Yes, I love advising families in business. I love to see the positivity because I know that families in business can thrive. So over the years, I've picked up my own methodology. It's my own way of working. A lot of families are very similar, but they're all different. They're all unique. And it's a matter of taking each of those people that are involved in the business and in the family and being able to understand them and bring them to the table and help them work out what it is that they want to do. Sometimes they have no idea what they want to do yet. And sometimes we help them work out, but we also support them to learn other things and other areas that might be of interest to them. So that's one of the positive things about being in a family business. You're able to share around ideas and talk freely, hopefully. And when it works, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to sort of, bump in and meet you at a range of events over the years and work with a really broad range of family businesses. There's so many inspirational stories just outside of, I said, I follow the stock exchange and the US NASDAQ and work with a bunch of VC people as well. It sounds like there's something a little bit more than just pure commerce there. It's just terrific to touch on that. It's great that you're still helping to foster and support that and help family businesses thrive. Now we're sort of out of time. I've got 50 seconds here on my timer just for a little wrap up. I just really want to say thanks everyone for tuning in. I want to say thanks to Matt. Matt's here somewhere. Matthew and I sort of spun this up really quickly. I think it was in 45 days. We bootstrapped it. I don't know if you know what bootstrap is, but it literally no money. We've self-funded this and spun it up in 45 days. We've had some terrific support by the likes of John, and we've got a range of other festival partners. And look, this year we thought of it as a bit of a national pilot. So in Perth, we're hoping to get the East Coast on board. The East Coast a little bit harder to crack, but the national pilot, we've had 10 events over there in Perth. We've worked with a really diverse range of fantastic family businesses in Perth, from patisserie to a dance school to a 40-year-old Italian fine food pasta company. And be kind if I've muffed any of this up. We're sort of short on time, but I think we've made a real impact. So 10 events in 45 days. And I think we've had 1,000+ community members come in and not just buy or shop from those participants, but interact with them, hear their stories, and sort of get a little bit of a closer bond, which is one of our key metrics. We don't, we want to encourage people to move away from just click to buy all the time. We want to get them out in the local community, supporting some terrific local family businesses. So really appreciate that support. Thanks for all your notes. We'll share the video links. We'll get this onto YouTube. We had a bit of a technical issue earlier, but look, thanks everyone, really appreciate it. And look, we're literally going to get started on next year's event. I think we're going to do it again. Matt and I are still alive. We've got a few grey hairs, as you can see, but we're going to go again in 2023. So feel free to go to the website and register in your interest to either participate or attend next year's program. But terrific, and really appreciate the time again, John. So thank you, mate.
Thanks very much, Jamie.
And we'll put your contact details when we get this up on YouTube as well. If anyone gets, wants to get in touch or have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions. People always ask questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? That's something I'm very comfortable with.